Now, so many times I've told you, listeners and viewers of Clutter, that please don't get me started on telling stories. But you know what? Sometimes I can't help it even if you try to stop me. So it's one of those days when a few stories will come in, and not just because I've been on vacation for about a week, so I've missed out on my work on Cut the Clutter, and I've been inflicting on you some of the older episodes which my colleagues thought were looking relevant even today. So my apologies for that, but that was also an alibi for missing my work for a week, but I think it was a well-deserved break. In my absence, however, many important things happened in the country. It looked like the news cycle was waiting for me to go away for just a week. So you had all this crisis in Maharashtra, you had other stuff coming up, and you also had these by-elections. Now, how much do by-elections matter in India? I'm sure you think that I've come back after a week, so I will talk about Maharashtra. We will talk about Maharashtra maybe in a day. But today, what I am fixated on is the bypoll results. And why should these bypoll results be so important? So you might be wondering that maybe it's about Uttar Pradesh, where Yogi Adityanath has actually defeated the Samajwadi Party in two of its strongholds, that is Azamgarh and Rampur. But this is not about that, because that doesn't change the essential politics of Uttar Pradesh or of Hindi heartland, and definitely not of India. But what's happened in a small state in these by-elections has the possibility not simply of changing politics in that state, but also changing politics in all of India, to the extent that it can create a challenge both for the BJP, which is the central government, and Aam Aadmi Party, which is the fastest growing pan-state party. Remember my words, I'm being very careful, fastest growing pan-state party. So in many states, there might be other parties which are growing faster than Aam Aadmi Party, but it's the only one that's growing across many states. Now, this development is one parliament by-election in Punjab, and that is the Sangrur Lok Sabha constituency. Now, Sangrur Lok Sabha constituency became available or vacant because Bhagwant Mann, who had won this election in 2019 and 2014, and he had won by a very handsome margin, he resigned because he got elected in the state assembly and became chief minister. Now, if you become chief minister, obviously you would prefer that. You have to resign from one. So he resigned from his parliament seat, and a by-election was held. Now, result of that by-election has been a big surprise. And once again, if you see the headlines, and some of these headlines will play on your screen, including on the print, these headlines would say that this is a setback for Aam Aadmi Party, that the chief minister in his own constituency, within 3 months of sweeping the election in the state, a massive victory in the state, has lost his own seat in Lok Sabha, right? Now, that is significant. It is a setback for Aam Aadmi Party. But to focus on that is missing the wood for the trees. It also happens because our memory spans are very short. We don't remember what happened in the past. We also don't, that's why we don't make the connection between what's happening today and what might happen tomorrow with what's happened in the past. And also because our thinking has become very Delhi-centric. All of us are Delhi-Lutyens-centric. So all of the Pandit class in India, all of the political Pandit class in India, we are very Delhi-fixated. So that is why we miss the wood for the trees, which is exactly what's happened in this case. Because the most important takeaway in politics in India in a long time now is not what's happening in Maharashtra. In Maharashtra, someone or the other will be in power. Whoever is in power will have the Shiv Sena in it in some way. Either a Shiv Sena A, B, C, D, X, Y, Z, real, unreal, virtual, whatever. But this is something that's happened in Punjab, which can be bring about a complete transformation in the state's politics and also the implications for the rest of the country. Now, the winner in Sangrur constituency is a man called Simranjit Singh Mann, 77 years old now, a former IPS officer. Younger people might strike some chord with them as in somebody who's used to be controversial, but maybe it won't, because if at all, even if you scratch somebody and somebody might remember, people say, but he's a has-been. And he's been a has-been now for more than 2 decades. Now, he is an interesting person. he has a party of his own, Shiromani Akali Dal Man. It's also called Shiromani Akali Dal Amritsar. So you can call it SADA, you can call it SADM. So this was like a rival Akali Dal that he formed. He this time has won this seat. He's won this seat by a small margin, by just a margin of about 7,000 votes. But that is not the story. So see the result this time. This time, Simranjit Singh Mann has won this election. He's got 2,53,000 some votes, which is 35.61% of the vote. The Aam Aadmi Party, which had won it by a handsome margin the last time, and you will see these numbers running on my screen, and I will tell you some highlight numbers also as we go along. They've got 34.79%, so marginally below, but they've lost this election in the Chief Minister's seat within 3 months of a famous victory sweeping the state. Indian National Congress, surprisingly, for this seat, because they've always been number 1 or number 2 in Sangrur, they've got just 79,000 votes. Just 79,000 votes. That's a decimation of the Congress party. That's 11% of the vote. That's all. So Congress party has got decimated, but that's mainly happened so far because Aam Aadmi Party has been vacuum cleaning the Congress party's votes. But in this place, in this result, there are lots of hidden messages. BJP, which normally would have got nothing in Sangrur. In fact, they would not even have contested in Sangrur. The candidate for Sangrur would have been always from Shiromani Akali Dal, because for a long time now, Shiromani Akali Dal and the BJP have been together. This time, BJP decided to contest on its own. And you know what's happened? BJP has got 66,000 votes. That is just about as many as the Congress. What does it tell us? It tells us that a lot of the Punjabi Hindus who by default voted for the Congress to keep the Akalis out are now switching to the BJP. And maybe some of those who shifted to Aam Aadmi Party have also switched to BJP. And the biggest surprise, and thereby lies the larger story, is that at number 5 is the Akali Dal. So Shiromani Akali Dal Man, that's Simranjit Singh Mann number 1, Aam Aadmi Party number 2, Indian National Congress number 3, BJP number 4, and Shiromani Akali Dal, which in the past has always been number 1 or number 2 with the Congress party until the AAP came in. And AAP came in, so they were 2 or 3. They are now number 5. And you know how many votes have we got? They've got 44,428 votes. So in Sangrur constituency, Shiromani Akali Dal, the premier Sikh party, has got less votes than even the BJP. That tells us again many new things. So draw some lessons from this, and I will list them for you. Number 1, what this means is that Akali Dal's vote has shifted to Simranjit Singh Mann, because what used to be Akali Dal vote has now gone to him. This is the loyal, what is called as the loyal Panthik vote, the devout Sikhs, particularly the devout rural Sikhs vote. That has been owned by the Akali Dal. Now see also these 2 graphics that I will show you on my screen. One graphic will tell you a kind of, I don't know how to describe this graph. My colleague Nikhil Rampal, who helps us with data, very often he's our data journalist, you see stories all the time. He tells me that I was trying to say, what is it? Hockey stick is when it begins like this and then goes up, right? We call that a hockey stick graph. I said, maybe we should call it a reverse hockey stick graph. Wo bhi nahi lagta, because reverse hockey stick would begin here, but come to the bottom like this, but it again starts rising up. So maybe it's a reverse hockey stick. He said maybe it's an eel graph. Eel is, as you know, a fish. It's an eel graph. But look at this graph. So when Simranjit Singh Mann contests the first time in 1989, and thereby lies some history that I'll tell you. In 1989, he contested in absentia while he was in Bhagalpur jail as an NSA detainee for more than 5 years. And he had been detained not just under NSA, but he had been charged with waging war on the state, sedition, all kinds of terrible laws. At one point, he was also investigated, never charged, we have to be clear, investigated as a possible suspect in Mrs. Gandhi's assassination. That assassination, by the way, had taken place when Mann was in the hiding. And I will tell you a little more detail on that in a minute. But in 1989 elections, where he could not even go and campaign, in the district of Tarantaran. See where it is? It is closer to the border in Punjab, in the Majha region of Punjab. See on the map? He won that election without campaigning, without needing to campaign, while being in jail, and he got 88% of the vote, more than 88% of the vote. And then see what's happening. I will give you some of this as we go along, but you see he comes down from 88, then he again wins in 1999 from another constituency, etc., etc. And then his vote declines. It declines and he contests many assembly elections. His vote goes down to about 3%. That becomes his ballpark real loyal vote, just about 3% from 88%. And it falls in one assembly election to as low as 1.6%. So this is the one graphic that shows you that his vote has fallen so much, and now suddenly his vote has come up. His vote came up to some extent in the last election, 2019-2022 assembly election also. It came up a little bit. He did not win in an assembly constituency in the same parliament, which is a segment of the same parliament constituency in Sangrur, but he became a second. So at least his vote percentage began coming back. This time he's got enough to win in the entire constituency, entire parliament constituency. So that's why I call it a reverse hockey stick graph. Now with that, see a second graphic. And this graphic tells you a larger political story. The larger political story is that as when his vote comes down, the Akali Dal, the conventional Shiromani Akali Dal vote goes up. Or because they were there earlier, let me reverse it. When Akali Dal retains its vote, Mann gets zilch. When the Shiromani Akali Dal, which is a more centrist, more mainstream, more avowedly and vocally nationalist party. I use those words very carefully. I'm not calling somebody not nationalist, but a more avowedly, more vocally nationalist mainstream party which has been partners with India's leading national party, that is the BJP. When they get their votes, Shiromani Akali Dal Mann, that is Simranjit Singh Mann's party, gets zilch, 1%, 2%, 3% like that. When the Akali Dal loses its vote, it neatly goes into Mann's party's vote share. So what does it mean? It means the devout Panthik vote, as it's called in Punjab, particularly rural Sikhs, old as well as young, they need a religious party, a party which they think will stay true to their religion and their religious edicts and religious principles. That conventionally is Shiromani Akali Dal. When Shiromani Akali Dal ceases to be at the center of gravity of Sikh politics, then Mann becomes the center of gravity. So first big implication of this election. Now that Shiromani Akali Dal has finished at number 5 and Mann at number 1, and we have seen in the assembly election also Shiromani Akali Dal's vote completely vaporizing. It's gone all over the place. That means that Panthik constituency is now going a begging. There's a vacuum in Sikh politics and Mann is moving into it now. It's a good thing or a bad thing? We'll just say, let's go by people's track record. Let's not prejudge people. So that is the big shift that's happened in Punjab. The conventional, I would say nationalist, Indian nationalist Sikh party has ceased to be at this point the center of gravity of Punjab politics and Sikh politics. Then see what the Akali Dal did in this election. They were afraid of losing their vote. So they got so desperate that as their candidate, who did they field? They fielded a woman called Kamaldeep Kaur Rajwana. Name sounds familiar? Kamaldeep Kaur Rajwana is the sister of a gentleman by the same second name, whose name you hear often when pleas come up for pardoning him, for releasing him, for pardoning him from his death sentence. Why is he on the death row or in life sentence? Because he was convicted for assassinating the former Punjab Chief Minister Sardar Beyant Singh. So Akali Dal, seeing the Hawa was Sikhs were angry, radicalism was coming back. So Shiromani Akali Dal fielded Rajwana's sister in this constituency. How many votes did they get? And how many votes did she get? She got a total of 44,428 votes. That's 6% or so. Where Mann has got 35.6, AAP has got 34.8%. INC has got 11%. BJP has got 9%, and the Akali Dal has got just about 6% or so. So Akali Dal has now has the vote share that Maan has when Akali Dal gets its own vote share. So see, all these elections, when Shiromani Akali Dal's vote goes up, it's a scissors graph. These are inversely proportional. That is the central political message, that Sikh politics, the center of gravity, has now shifted from the Badal's party to Maan party. What does it mean? In Punjab, what it could mean is that later, not much later from now, there will be another very important election in Punjab. And that is the election to the Shiromani Gurdwara Prabandhak Committee. Now, SGPC is a body which is an elected body. Elections are held by the State Election Commission. Only Sikhs vote for it. It manages all the premier Sikh Gurdwaras and Sikh institutions. So the real power of Sikh politics emanates from the Gurdwaras. Now, whoever controls SGPC controls Sikh politics. In fact, even when the Bhindranwale phenomenon came, people say there's a lot of folklore that Mrs. Gandhi and Zail Singh built Bhindranwale and he went out of control. It's partly true. It's partly true to the extent that initially they thought that the way to weaken the Akali Dal was to create another party which makes those extreme demands which Akali Dal never makes when they are in power, which they make when they are out of power. And they thought that someone like Bhindranwale could win the SGPC election and thereby weaken the Akalis. Bhindranwale could not win the SGPC election. In fact, he came a cropper, but he became a force in his own right. Now, that's a different story, but that's what happened. In this case now, if Maan's party now wins SGPC elections, then all bets will be off on Punjab's politics and also on national politics, and also the direction where the state will be going or where the Sikh population will be going, particularly in terms of radicalism versus the moderate majority, or what has so far been the moderate majority. We have to see what happens in this case. While you've seen these graphics, I will also run through some figures quickly with you. Look at 1989 election. That's what Maan contested from his jail, from jail in Bhagalpur. 1989 election, Taran Taran. Now, Taran Taran is one of those districts, border districts, which in that period, between say 1989 to 1991, the toughest period in Punjab insurgency, that was listed by a lot of people as among quote-unquote liberated districts, where the writ of the government did not run, where even people like us as reporters, when we drove there, we were afraid of driving at night. And if we drove at night, we were stopped at nakabandis or checkpoints, not by the police. We were stopped by militant groups. And they asked us for our identity. And once they figured you were a journalist, they let you go, because until then there was still honor among thieves. Later that ended also, because journalists also began to get attacked. Even national journalists who were not local journalists were already being attacked. They also began getting attacked, and things changed. So it was that constituency where he won. 88% of the vote he got. What did the Congress get? Congress got a little less than 8% of the vote. So it was 5,27,000 versus 47,000. So he won by nearly 5 lakhs votes, which was a record at that time without even going there. Then 1998, Sangrur. Again, he contested, but this time he lost. By this time, Shiromani Akali Dal was back. In 1989, Shiromani Akali Dal wasn't contesting. In 1998, Shiromani Akali Dal was back. So Surjit Singh Barnala, who also became a national agriculture minister at one point and then governor of Tamil Nadu, etc. Surjit Singh Barnala won this election. He got 2.97 lakh votes, or 39.8% votes. Maan came second with about 28% vote, and Congress party came third. Votes were generally evenly divided, but SAD Maan, and INC. 1999, Maan won again this time. So those were the two occasions on which he actually won an election. Barnala was second, and CPIM was third in Sangrur. Sangrur district, by the way, is where a lot of the left sympathy lies in Punjab. A lot of the old left organizations, particularly in the agrarian sector among farmers, rose there, and that is where I will tell you some stories as we go ahead. 2004, again Shiromani Akali Dal, Surinder Singh Dhindsa won the election. He got up 2.86 lakh votes. Congress was second. Mann was now third with about 25% vote. 2009, again, Vijender Singh Singla of the Congress party won. Surinder Singh Dhindsa of the Akali Dal again was second with 34% vote, and Mann was now at number 5 with 3.6% vote. So see the same equation. When Shiromani Akali Dal gets the votes, Mann loses them. It's the same votes which travels between SAD and SADM, which travels between the conventional old settled party, establishment Sikh party or established Sikh party, you can use either expression, and between the challenger, who's like an individual challenger, that is Mann. So he was down to 3.6%. Again, 2001-6, Khadur Sahib. That is another constituency that he went to. In that constituency, again, he finished third with just how much vote? 1.3% vote. That was the lowest he's touched. So by that time, it was evident that Punjab had left militancy, radicalism, extremism, the Khalistan idea behind by a long distance. It was a bad memory, it was a bad dream. Nobody, it seemed, wanted to be reminded of it. Then we come to Sangrur in 2019. Sangrur in 2019, Bhagwant Mann won with 4,13,000 votes he got. Keval Dhillon of Congress was number 2 with 3,03,000 votes. Shiromani Akali Dal was third with 2,63,000 votes, and where was Mann? 48,000, 4% votes. Once again, Shiromani Akali Dal got its vote, Mann got zilch. In the same constituency, 2022, it's completely reversed. Now the Akali Dal is fifth, Mann is number 1. So once again, it proves our scissors graphic or reverse hockey stick graphic. You can choose to call what you want. MLA elections. He contested in many MLA elections. In 1997, he lost. He got 13% vote. That was in a constituency called Kila Raipur. 1997, he contested in the second constituency, that is Sarhind. There he finished at number 3 with 17% or 18% of the vote. Congress won that. Shiromani Akali Dal was second. Again, the same principle. 2007 assembly in Dhanoli. He again finished way down at number 5. He got 15% of the vote. 2012 Fatehgarh Sahib Assembly constituency contested. Again, he finished way behind. Kuljit Singh Nagra of the Congress won it. Narrowly followed by Prem Singh Chandu Manjra of the Akali Dal. So Congress party got 32% vote. Akali Dal got 28% vote. Mann got 2.9% vote. It was the same Sikh vote that he wanted, which the Akali Dal was getting. Again, Barnala constituency is 27. Full marks for trying. He never gave up. He's the real King Bruce, right? He kept on trying. So Gurmeet Thayer of Aam Aadmi Party won this. This is in Barnala. In 2017 assembly elections in Barnala, the first time Aam Aadmi Party fought in the state assembly, Aam Aadmi Party became the second largest party. Gurmeet Singh Thayer won this seat in Barnala. He was Mann again, was way down, number 4 with just 3.8%. These things are so recent. And now we see what happened in 2022. After he lost parliament election in 2019 in Sangrur, in 2022, I told you, he is the King Bruce to the spider. In 2022, he contested again for the assembly in the state assembly election from Amargarh in the same parliament constituency and again lost. There Professor Jaswant Singh Gajan Majra of Aam Aadmi Party won. He by now had risen sort of up the vote ladder. He now became number 2, and that was the first sign that his vote share was going up, because this election also marked once again a fresh decline of Shiromani Akali Dal, because the farmers movement had also sparked fires of radicalism in many parts of Punjab, and also Shiromani Akali Dal because it had been a partner of the BJP, and by this time there was a strong anti-BJP mood among the Sikhs. He benefited from that and he came close. That was the first indication of the return of Simranjit Singh Mann, and that's exactly what's happened now. Now all bets are off in terms of what will happen in Punjab as a result of his rise. Who is Simranjit Singh Mann? He was born in 1945 in a very privileged family. His father was Lieutenant Colonel Joginder Singh Mann, who was Speaker of Punjab Assembly in 1967. By the way, that is the year in which Simranjit Singh Mann also joined the IPS. He's an IPS officer of 1967 batch. So the father was a politician. He then got married to the daughter of Gyan Singh Kalon. Gyan Singh Kalon was one of India's early ICS officers, Indian Civil Service officer. One of his daughters is married to Simranjit Singh Mann, or let me reverse it, let me not sound sexist. Simranjit Singh Mann is married to one of Gyan Singh Kalon's daughters. Amrinder Singh, Captain Amrinder Singh, is married to his other daughter, to his older daughter. Now you see what a small world this is, and how the two brothers-in-law have gone in different directions. Also, mind you, both had resigned, one from the IPS, other from the Congress party, after Operation Blue Star in 1984. Now, he had a distinguished innings. Mann had a distinguished innings in Punjab police. He was known for slightly radical or conservative thoughts. In fact, he was a gold medalist in Government College, Chandigarh. In what subjects? That's interesting. Punjabi, religion, and political science. So this is one of those cases where your education actually seems to have determined where you progressed in life. So he was known to be a tough, very anglicized, very aristocratic IPS officer. We sort of knew him and knew about him when we were young reporters in Punjab between 1977 to say 1980. By that time, he was an SSP. He also made his fame at that point because he had busted the drug smuggling racket from Punjab. Sounds very familiar? He caught nearly 7,500, 8,000 drug smugglers and their contacts. So he built quite a reputation, but was always known to be conservative and had slightly controversial views, which he kept sort of controlled, but was generally seen to be more inclined towards the Akali Dal than the other party. Now, 1984, when Operation Blue Star took place, he was posted in Mumbai or Bombay then as Group Commandant of Central Industrial Security Force. He resigned shortly afterwards. What happened? Just after Blue Star, he got very angry and he gave an interview to Shobha Day, the same Shobha Day, right? Shobha Day, she used to then bring out Celebrity magazine. So he gave an interview to Celebrity magazine where he said that the assault on Golden Temple was like Jallianwala Bagh massacre, and he said Indian Army was like General Dyer. So obviously it got him into immediate trouble. He was sacked from service. He then soon enough he went overground. So for about 3 months, he was overground. So later, when they investigated him for a possible role in Mrs. Gandhi's assassination, from which he was completely discharged, no case was made out against him. He then tried to escape to the US and was caught by a large team of Indian intelligence and police on the India-Nepal border. So he was caught, if I remember correctly, in about December of 1984. And he was then brought back for interrogation and went through very hard interrogation for a long time, for almost a year. Because once the government gets you on a national security issue, life becomes very tough. And that government in India, whether Indira Gandhi's or Rajiv Gandhi's, those were very tough governments, very tough governments when it came to national security. So for about a year, he was given a very rough treatment. After about a year, he was brought to jail. Bharatpur, Bhagalpur, spent most of his time in Bhagalpur jail in very tough conditions. Now, how do we know more about what happened to him, to his life in those 5 years? That's because Pavit Kaur, his daughter, she wrote his biography, which is titled Stolen Years, a memoir of Simranjit Singh Mann's imprisonment. It was published by Random House in 2014. You can check it out. I will also share with you a review that my friend and former colleague Kumi Kapoor wrote on this in Indian Express in 2014, which is when the book came out. There she mentions some of these stories from the jail, the kind of torture he went through, how he was denied even some religious books. Even Bhai Veer Singh was a Punjabi literary figure. His biography of Guru Gobind Singh, etc., etc. And she's quoted copiously from his diaries and letters to the family. And in one of those writings, he has written, and I'm quoting, "Misfortunes and hard conditions in jail have made me very pessimistic. right? But he might have been pessimistic, but it was from jail finally that he won his election with 5 lakh votes. And then what happened was VP Singh's government came in. And that I've said it before many times and I'll say it again. If there's been one government in India's history which has been weak on national security, it was VP Singh's government, because it was under their watch that both Punjab and Kashmir went completely out of control, and many other parts of the country also had serious trouble. Lots of tens of thousands of people lost their lives avoidably. In fact, if you look at the history of terror in Punjab, between 1990 and 91, there was a 12-month period when more than 15,000 people were killed in Punjab. 15,000, these are recorded figures, not estimates, of which about 1,500 were uniformed people, almost all policemen. So Punjab went through that time in VP Singh's time. So one of the first acts that VP Singh's government did, they withdrew cases against all those detained after Blue Star, including Simranjit Singh Mann, and he was released. And he came back out of the jail. Now, I told you I'll do some storytelling. So 1984, after Blue Star, I told you Amrinder Singh and Simranjit Singh Mann, they both resigned from wherever they were, one from the party, one from the government, from Indian Police Service. There was a third officer in Indian Foreign Service. His name was Harinder Singh Khalsa. He was an Indian consul in Oslo in Norway. He also resigned and he sought asylum there. He sought asylum, he got asylum. He actually set up a little eatery. He even worked as a postman for some time to fend for himself. He was charged as a Khalistani, as a separatist, a charge that he denies. In fact, at that point, I had called him on the phone and interviewed him for India Today. And he said, look, I hold Jarnail Singh Bhindranwale in deep admiration, but I'm not a separatist. And incidentally, because we are storytelling, the 1974 batch that Harinder Singh Khalsa comes from also had as his batchmates Hardeep Puri, our central minister now, and his wife Lakshmi Murdeshwar Puri. So this was quite a distinguished batch. Anyway, it's all three have gone in different ways. You know where Amrinder Singh has gone. We know where Mann has gone. Where did Harinder Singh Khalsa go? Now, he too was from a distinguished political family. Now, Harinder Singh Khalsa's father, Gopal Singh Khalsa, had also studied law in Britain. This was a distinguished Dalit political family of Punjab. In fact, in 1937, when the first elected provincial government in Punjab came in, and Sir Sikandar Hayat became the premier, or what used to be the chief minister then, his political secretary was Gopal Singh Khalsa. Gopal Singh Khalsa got his kids to study hard. Both joined Indian Foreign Service. Harinder Singh Khalsa was one of them. The other was Butt Shikan Singh. Now, what is Butt Shikan? Butt Shikan is Urdu or Persian for iconoclast, one who goes and breaks idols. So there was this officer in Indian Foreign Service, Harinder Singh Khalsa's brother, called Butt Shikan Singh. So Butt Shikan Singh, he is also retired now. They were both these fine Punjabi officers who had made it to Indian Foreign Service. Harinder Singh Khalsa, when he came back, he first joined the Akali Dal, became an MP. Then he joined BJP. Then he joined Aam Aadmi Party. 2014, he won for Lok Sabha. He was one of the 4 Aam Aadmi Party MPs elected from Punjab, from one of the reserved constituencies. Within months, he fell out because, as he then told me, that we've now realized how we are being made fool of, his line, not mine. So he then left Aam Aadmi Party. He was expelled for anti-party activities. He again came back to the BJP. He also served under Vajpayee government for 3 years as a member of the SC/ST Commission. I told you they were a Dalit family, although nobody used the word Dalit those days. And later again came back to the BJP to yet again leave the BJP in protest against the farmers' bill. So this is how the journeys of these very interesting people and fascinating people have gone on. Now the final story is, and that's the reason this episode of Clutter is a little bit longer than even my usual standard. Maybe I'm making up for missing it for a week. So I'm inflicting a longer one on you. Now in 1978, maybe it's 77 late or 1978 sometime, was the first time I came across Simranjit Singh Mann, at least by reputation, if not physically. So there was an incident in Punjab's Faridkot district. The incident was that there was a farmers' protest, a leftist farmers' protest, or what might be called a Naxal farmers' protest. Punjab had a very strong Naxal movement. So this was a group called Bharat Naujawan Sabha, which owns its ancestry to Sardar Bhagat Singh, Shahid Bhagat Singh no less. It is part of the old Indian communist revolutionaries. Now, they had some trouble with the government anyway, and there was a case then when one of its activists, because he asked too many inconvenient questions or persistently in a rally that Chief Minister then, Prakash Singh Badal, was addressing, the police arrested him. Remember who was the SSP in that district? I will just come to that, although I might have given away the suspense. So he was arrested by the police, or he was picked up by the police. His people, left activists, went to High Court with a habeas corpus. So High Court asked for him to be presented in court. Police said, we don't have him. So the High Court sent its registrar looking for him. So the registrar was looking for him, and police kept on transferring him from the back of one vehicle to the other. So for 13 or 14 days, the registrar was searching for him. This activist, I forget his full name, but he was generally known as Comrade Tota Sahab, or Comrade Tota. Tota as in parrot, because he talked too much, I suppose. Now, as this happened, this snowballed into something else, and these farmers came and gherowed the police station called Jaito. Because they gherowed the police station, the police got so angry that in reprisals, the police there sent mounted police to destroy the ripened cotton crops of the farmers. Now that became a big story, and I was sent to cover it. So when I went to Faridkot, I was looking for the district SSP. SSP was Simranjit Singh Mann. So I'd given you the story away partly, but now I'm telling you. Simranjit Singh Mann was the SSP, and I was told that Mann साहब तो कहीं गए हुए हैं, पर उनके एक बहुत नौजवान ASP हैं और वो बहुत अच्छे हैं. He's a very good young officer. ASP, he's a very idealistic young man. Please go and meet him. He'll give you the picture. So I went to see this young ASP. He was in a small house, in a one-room house, where his wife was cooking on a kerosene stove in a corner. He was a 1974 batch IPS officer who was on training. It was his first training. And his seniors from that time even now tell me, because I've made phone calls just to refresh my memory, when he came to Faridkot for his training, he just had one of those. Remember in old days, you used to have these trunks, sandook jisko bolte hain, made of steel or tin. So he had just come in with a tin ka sandook, with a trunk. And there he settled down, very idealistic young officer. So he chatted with me, and he told me how idealistic his boss was, his SSP was, how he thought that leftists were so anti-national, leftists were anti-religion, that religion had a place in our society, so leftists had to be crushed, etc., etc. Now, what was the name of this IPS officer? His name was Muhammad Izhar Alam. Now, Muhammad Izhar Alam later rose to be the DGP of Punjab, DG Police of Punjab. Muhammad Izhar Alam also became among the toughest fighters against terrorism in Punjab. In fact, there were allegations and allegations of excesses against him. It was also said that he runs a private army which just bumps off anybody. These were allegations. It was called Alam Sena or Fauji Alam. There were also jokes, because Kashmir trouble was beginning then, that if Rajiv Gandhi wants Kashmir to be sorted, all he has to do is send Muhammad Izhar Alam to Kashmir as SSP Srinagar, and soon enough the militants will say, Saab jo karna hai, will sign on the dotted line. So he built that reputation. He rose to be DGP. So his boss, Simranjit Singh Mann, went in one direction, Alam went in another direction. Alam, by the way, unfortunately died last year, just at the age of 72. Alam tried to join politics. In 2012, he joined Akali Dal, and he tried to contest from Malerkotla, the one constituency in Punjab which has a Muslim majority. But then immediately there was a lot of pushback in Shiromani Akali Dal that how can you have somebody who's been involved in the police carrying out so many encounters, how can he be your candidate? So he was given a little lollipop. He was made the chairman of Waqf board in the state, and his wife was given the ticket to contest from Malerkotla. Farzana Nusra Khatun, and she got elected because every party in Punjab needs a Muslim candidate for Malerkotla. She got elected, so he went in that direction. Now I know it's all become very involved. It's also become a bit long, but that's because all these stories, all these lives are intertwined, and you can see circumstances how they can take one into one direction, one into other. And if you want to see how dramatically these directions changed, until yesterday, Simranjit Singh Mann's bio on his Twitter page said that he is fighting for Khalistan, and there was no pretense of an autonomous state within India. He said Khalistan is sovereign Sikh state. Morning after he got elected, he was cautious, so he removed it. So he removed that line, striving for Khalistan as sovereign Sikh state, right? But then people noticed it. Even our reporter noticed it, and these stories came out. The moment the stories came out, he's now restored that objective, which is striving for Khalistan as sovereign Sikh state. So this is the complexity, and these are the layers of Punjab. And I thought that is why this election, this by-election, can be a turning point. I'm not sure it's a good turning point, but it's a turning point nevertheless. Now, you might ask me about some details. You might ask me, why can't I give precise dates, or why did I say this Faridkot incident was between 77, 78 or thereabouts? That's because this was published, those stories were published in the Indian Express at that time. Papers from that period are not digitized, at least in an Indian system, but they are digitized someplace. So we are trying to get that data. And I keep telling you that once we start our paywall, then one of the things we'll put behind the paywall is the total archive of my lifetime's work. And for that, we are collecting stuff like this and we'll put it there. So we are at it. It's taken us some time because it's a lot of hard work. It's delving into a lot of stuff over 45 years of work. But soon enough, when we go behind the paywall, as a subscriber, you will be able to read some of this stuff.